Just, yeah. There you got the notice.
But real quickly, I'm Carl Dickens, co-chair of Santa Fe Rivers Traditional Communities Collaborative. I'm also the spokesperson for the Pipeline Coalition. So that's it for right now.
Cool.
Mari,
Yeah.
Mari, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi. Our names sound so similar. I'll jump in. I'm Amara from the Santa Fe Watershed Association with Andy and Lori.
I can follow up to that. I'm Maury Hensley. I'm also with the Santa Fe Watershed Association.
And I'll follow up. I'm Andy Otto with the Santa Fe Watershed.
We got a lot of the guys today.
We got, it's 50% of our whole staffing is here.
Good. Anjali, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anjali Bean, and I'm the Water Resources Manager for Santa Fe County.
Kelsey?
I am Kelsey Kohler, and my partner Jay and I just purchased Ed Series property in La Cienega.
Leonard?
I'm Leonard Henderson. I'm a doctoral student in natural resource sociology at the Utah State University, working with Courtney and the Watershed Association in Santa Fe right now.
Mr. Siri?
No, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, I'm Ed Siri. I've been working on the Santa Fe watershed for about 35 years, and I plan to continue to do that. And I'm pleased to see that Kelsey is here this morning.
Excellent. Dr. Flint?
Hi, everybody. I'm Courtney Flint. I'm a professor in environment and society up at Utah State University, and we're working on a stakeholder assessment project with Andy and Maury and the Watershed Association. And it's very nice to meet all of you today.
Mr. Munzberger?
Good morning. I'm Darren Munzberg. I'm the chairman of the La Wahala Traditional Village Committee and the vice president of the La Wahala Community Ditch and Mutual Domestic Water Association, and have been the delegate from La Wahala to this collaborative since 2011 at its founding.
Okay, welcome aboard. Does everybody know where all these different communities are, like La Bajada? Leonard, you know where La Bajada is? Okay, good. I just want to make sure you got that context. Anyway, Andy, why don't you go ahead and lead it off? You've got the watershed plan. This is where I want to make some distinction, excuse me, between what Andy is doing with the Watershed Association and what the Pipeline Coalition is doing, because they're really absolutely separate things. Andy's looking at the big picture, the Watershed Association is looking at the big picture of the entire watershed. What the Pipeline Coalition and planning process, the stakeholder involved process, is looking it's looking at what happens when the river flow is reduced by 50% once the, if and when the pipeline, return flow pipeline is installed. And so ours is just, it's segmented. We're looking at the lower part of it, but Andy, this is an opportunity to discuss your comprehensive watershed planning. So lead off.
Well, and being a good executive director, I'm going to pass the ball to Maury. But I will say that we originally started the grant application now about 2.5 years ago. Courtney and Todd Kaplan with GSA out of Albuquerque were the main characters, I'll say, in that application, and we got it, which is great. And it's a phase 1 of a watershed plan, hopefully leading to phase 2 or 3 or 4 down the road as we go. So I'm going to let Maury Hensley talk about where we are and what we're doing. And Leonard and Dr. Flynn are here to kind of answer any questions or fill in as we need to. So there you go, Maury.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Yeah, I will also defer to Courtney and Leonard a lot, but I think we have had the opportunity, and Courtney and Leonard have had the opportunity to chat with most of you on the call. So thank you for participating. So I guess just to give an overview of where we are in this grant process, we have about 9 more months, 9 or 10 months until the phase 1 grant is completed. So we've been spending about the last year identifying representatives of various stakeholder groups throughout the watershed. And you all represent multiple groups yourselves. And so, you know, we've spent about the last year reaching out to you all and folks like you throughout the watershed and having initial interviews. Then Leonard and Courtney have been spending a lot of time transcribing the interviews and coding them, and now starting this second process of sorting the or returning to stakeholders and asking you all to sort this list of 63 priorities that were identified and sort of taken out of the initial interviews into a quantitative metric, basically. So Courtney can talk more about that, and Leonard, but essentially the idea with that is that it's just another way to kind of represent and compile all of the feedback from stakeholders and stakeholder groups, and hopefully that can inform ongoing planning. And, you know, we'll be sharing that and working with various government departments and agencies. But it's not, just to clarify, this project is not tied at all to the work that the city is doing with the pipeline. It's a completely separate project, just like Carl was saying, that, you know, it's been a little bit confusing for some folks because of the timing, because we have been reaching out to folks at the same time, but this is a much larger picture project that isn't necessarily tied at this point in time, although it's really valuable to us to be getting the feedback that is in some ways related to the pipeline, because obviously that's something that's on everyone's mind. So that's kind of where we are. We're gearing up to start planning for kind of how we can move forward with these data, but we'll be writing a report, and I'm sure that we'll be sharing that with you, and that will be available, you know, sometime next fall. So stay tuned for that. Courtney, Leonard, anything to add? Also, if you all have any questions for Courtney and Leonard more specifically about the process, I think they're here to answer some of those.
Yeah, I'll just pipe up here and say that the work that we're doing with the Watershed Association is, it takes a little bit of time. We interviewed like 63 people in 55 interviews. Took a while to reach out to be able to connect with as many folks as we did. We weren't able to ultimately connect with everyone who was on our list. But at some point we decided we'd gotten a critical mass and we moved on. And then it took us a while we had hoped to come and do some work in person with these priorities that we've extracted out of the interviews, and wanted to do this sorting process that we're doing now. We wanted to do that in person with everybody. It's a lot more fun. But given the circumstances, we are in an online world. So it took a little while to get that developed, but that is currently out, as Maury said, and folks should have a couple folks here on the list to have that in their email. I think Bobby has, been participating. Carl, I think, is in that list. And so it's really wonderful if people on the list can take time to really sort the priorities. What our goals are in the longer term is to come to Santa Fe, share what the data are telling us, but to get all of you to help us interpret it, to really tap into your knowledge. You know this watershed way better than we'll ever know it. So it's important that we here, we're working with the data that you have, that folks from the Santa Fe watershed altogether have shared with us. But to actually interpret that, we really need your wisdom. So we'll hope to do that. We really kind of hope we can do that by February or March. And then, if we can, before the year's out, we might be developing an additional short survey that can go out to a wide array of stakeholders, and be a short thing that the rest of you who are on the call here that may not have been able to participate in this current process would then have a chance to weigh in on some of these issues and priorities. So we're not trying to create a tight club here of folks with this. We will continue to try to be as inclusive as we can. Leonard, anything else you'd like to add? And then we can certainly answer questions.
Yeah, nothing pressing. I think that was essentially, I know, I think here, Carl, you're the only one that I'm planning on bugging a little bit more to fill out our sorting process.
I get bugged a little bit, so don't worry.
Oh yeah, not a problem. I've been playing the game of how much nagging is too much nagging. But I do want to say I've had the kind of honor and pleasure to talk to a lot of folks in your watershed, and the passion of just about everybody I talk to is pretty remarkable. So it's been a really enjoyable experience.
Any questions, folks?
Darren has his hand up.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy. I guess, Dr. Flint, really my question is, speaking to the inclusivity of stakeholders and getting that input, in as much as the return flow credit pipeline has become its own sort of, if you will, stakeholder, right? What I kind of have got, I'd like to forward the information I've got from New Mexico Wild with regard to Comexico LLC and their extended mining claims now around Thompson Peak and their recent objection to the Forest Service. Directly said to impact the eastern Santa Fe watershed. So I think, who we're not seeing here this morning is Source Water Protection Team, right, from Santa Fe, who, Andy, the Watershed Association is on that project, participating in the source water protection with Dr. From the city.
Yeah, we gave comments. That was all. We were not
okay. All right. So, but just to bring it to the interest of the collaborative, here is another extant and emerging influence that needs to be considered, perhaps. And then maybe now it's easier to identify and put the finger on it and say, what, it's Comexico. So now you need to find out what this mining firm, who's the local tentacle of an Australian global mineral extraction syndicate, and figure out what type of, they're making direct objection at this point to the Forest Service plan, and they're also that's as of November 1st. But part of their assertions and their assertion of standing is trying to co-opt, this is where it touches my nerve, mining there as a traditional use, and say that the Forest Service's assessment of mining activity there and the scale of it and the feasibility of it is out of whack, and that that's the basis of their claim. So beware. They're ready to misrepresent that, but here's a new one if you didn't see it on your flank. So be aware of Comexico, and maybe it would be interesting to reach out to them in the academic interest, right, or the assessment and sorting interest, and get that feedback. I find it especially interesting because they're using that sort of quasi-traditional use-based argument.
Yeah,
that's needed to bring that to the collaborative's attention. Thanks.
Can someone elaborate on what the Forest Service plan is? I'm not aware of it.
I can forward you a link to that. It's they're in their 5 to 15-year planning cycle, and it's basically their land management and watershed management and wilderness designation proposals and motorized trail use. It's the whole thing. So, and it's just I think barely closed from public comment from this most recent revision.
Yeah,
but it's ongoing.
It's actually part of 3 national forests. The Cibolo and the Carson and the Santa Fe are all did it at the same time, better or worse. And it is their forest plan, if you will, moving forward on that. This project is over in the Pecos watershed, just to the east. And Darren mentioned Mount Thompson, which is I'll say dead center for our watershed, looking up watershed, dead center, and it's to the right of Mount Thompson over in that corner of it. The Forest Service it's not like they issue a permit. But they do take the comments and identify potential problem areas. And they've started that draft going, as Darren mentioned. And then Comexico immediately, by the way, said, oh, wait a minute, you can't make this a wilderness area. We're going to do a mine there. I'm over summarizing, but anyway, so this is yet to come.
The
Upper Pecos
details in which the
Association-
devil are with that one is that they have now disclosed that they have acquired over 200 smaller claims that lead into the eastern Santa Fe watershed that they wish to amalgamate or conglomerate now.
Yeah.
So Darren, where's it affecting us in the lower watershed?
Generally, I think primarily as a solidarity issue among traditional communities, from the Pecos watershed to our own watershed. And as it goes down, of course, the effect is any type of interference with source water protection from the city of Santa Fe turns into some other Rube Goldstein cockamamie scheme to make paper water for the city at the expense of the traditional communities, right? You know, Rube Goldstein's not even an original Rube Goldberg design. No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's an imitation Goldberg, right?
Yeah. I'll throw in one quick thing though, because part of our comments is monitoring groundwater. No one has been able to tell me, do we share an aquifer with the Pecos, with that part of the Upper Pecos? And so we always say, well, let's find out. That's got to be one of the.
Well, and that's very high in the questions for Comexico, it's one of the target issues is looking at the influence on groundwater. Not to mention surface water. I mean, how many examples of the mining pollution that we have, right? But yes, that's why the groundwater influence needs to be explored further up there. It's not, unfortunately, it's something like I say that the tentacles are reaching over into our watershed. So. Albeit further north than Paseo Real. Huh?
Yeah, I would say as the community in La Cienega and La Cienega with the springs that we have, looking at the groundwater influence makes us direct stakeholders in terms of what is a possible consequence of the mining projects, even more so than the surface water, because I mean, our area is riddled with springs.
I have a couple questions, one for Dr. Flint. And one of the things I was thinking about, since we're kind of developing our own stakeholder process, is the use of surveys. I think that's a really efficient way to gather information. So maybe offline or another time we can talk about how you develop those. But I think that would be a really important addition to what we're doing in terms of the Pipeline Coalition. And a question I have is whether or not you were able to get in contact with the Pueblos. That's an ongoing issue with us. So you did?
Yes, we were ultimately able to connect with Cocha di Pueblo and the Pueblos Tesuque. So,
Excellent. Excellent.
yeah. So yeah, we're trying to be as inclusive as we can, given our timeline. But we do hope to loop back around. And related to surveys, if there's anything we can do to help with just some basics on surveys, kind of depends on, who you're reaching out to in terms of how you want to do it. There's still nothing wrong with a good old fashioned paper survey. If you feel like you've got people who are online, that's a nice inexpensive way to do a survey. There's some great platforms to develop surveys these days to use online. Just people can just click away at it. There's other ways to do things by phone or using an iPad, getting people out to talk with people. There's a lot of different modes that can be used to do various surveys. And, sometimes you'll have better luck doing it yourself. Sometimes when you get the universities involved, there's a lot of bureaucratic. Andy and Maury learned about this. We have to jump through a lot of red tape to be able to do surveys for research. But for interest groups and so forth, like yours, there are people like us, or certainly from New Mexico State Extension, who can really provide some helpful resources to help with that. So I think that's a good idea. Our survey that we've got right now is one of the longer ones that you'll probably see. Bobby can probably attest to that. We get most people, I think our average is about 17 minutes, but that spreads out a lot. Some people do it in a couple minutes and some people take quite a long time. And it's just different people have a different way of working through those things. But length really matters. If you want to get people to do your survey, and not everyone is quite as invested as the stakeholders that we have been involving. Some people just aren't willing to spend more than a couple of minutes. So you have to really think closely about what it is you really want to know, and be pretty precise. So,
Courtney,
yeah, thanks.
Courtney, were you able to reach out to Santo Domingo? They're another pueblo that is a stakeholder in the Santa Fe watershed.
I think that we did, but we weren't able to hear back, is my understanding.
All right.
But this isn't over. We have this group of people that we're doing our phase 2 questionnaire with. But as I said, we want to loop back around and open the conversation up to, more people, hopefully in a facilitated kind of setting, and getting some feedback on the findings that we present, and then hopefully being able to move on to a broader survey to get feedback. So hopefully that'll work. And Darren, I just wanted to say thanks so much for bringing these things to our attention, and they're important issues that need to be on our radar screen as we go about refining our summary preliminary findings, I guess, for the next couple of months. So thank you.
Now, Leonard, when you described what you're getting your doctorate in, was there a sociology part of that? That's fascinating to me. So could you explain that?
Absolutely. So right now I'm a doctoral student with the Department of Sociology, and my area emphasis is community and environment, but I specifically look at natural resource sociology. So I'm much more on the social side of management. I oftentimes ask a lot of questions about power and inequality, who's represented, even as we do projects like this, and defining who a stakeholder is. A lot of my interests look at water rights, of kind of these social structures that we create and then are embedded in, and what change looks like, what collaboration looks like. Sometimes I'm overly critical, and I have that we need to burn it all down approach, but oftentimes I see lots of things that are exciting and give me optimism. So I'm really interested in the human aspects of the management of our resources.
We definitely need to get you down here at some point.
Yes.
All
We'll
right.
get you into some very interesting groups for sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Good folks too. So any other questions from the group? Well, it just sounds exciting. This is the kind of stuff I think that really enhances our ability to understand kind of this unique. One of the things we mentioned just a second ago is the hydrogeological features of the area. And boy, is it complicated. And I was actually emailed Stacy Timmons this morning just to kind of give her an update as to where we're at, because I think that she's with the Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources down in Socorro. And I think there's going to come a point, I know there's going to come a point where we're going to need to lean on them for information. There's certain areas that haven't been studied, there's certain areas that have been studied, but when we start talking about the hydrogeological connections between the wells in El Dorado and the springs in La Cienega, those are the kinds of things that are important to bring into the conversation as we discuss planning for the lower watershed. And so I explained that it's going to be a while because we'll talk about that later. I'll talk about that later. Never mind. All right. So yeah, continue, Andy. What's the next part of this?
Our next subject that we wanted to go through is, and it was an idea that Neil Williams came up with, and I think it's a good one, to create a symposium to develop a resource library of lower watershed papers. And to give you an idea, Kelsey, you had mentioned, the groundwater. Well, Peggy Johnson in 2015 did an incredible groundwater study for La Cienega and La Cienega. So we want to get that in there. And the idea is to create this resource library to house them in a public place. We just plop them on our website, or the links on our website is the idea. And we're looking at February. It's a classic. We formed this education subcommittee or committee of the collaborative, and it's a classic function of that, trying to collect as many of these documents as we can. Neil Williams is a great resource on that. Bill Schneider had said that they will submit all the papers that he can. The county, Anjali, all their papers. And the idea is to just get as many scientific papers in as we can. It's something that Todd Kaplan has been working on a lot. Todd is working with Courtney on this phase 1 of a watershed plan. But we thought we'd do it for just the lower watershed, sort of on our own, bringing in all these things. And of course, we'll bring in Todd's as well, what he's found. So you'll be hearing more on that from us. It'll be asking for any links or papers that you're aware of. William Mee, he has 5 pages of lists of links already, but I love it. And Darren has a goodly amount as well. So we want to get all these together and just have them. We're not going to make any great analyses on them, but we want to make them available to everybody in one place. So that's
Andy,
yeah.
Andy, could that also include mapping?
Yeah, well, we'll actually have that from Todd Kaplan as part of our phase 1 that we're doing for the Bureau of Reclamation. And Todd Kaplan from GSA has been putting those together. So we'll have that mapping of our watershed. But,
Cool.
There's so many going back. I mean, in my office here, I'm going back 20, 25 years. We have all kinds of reports that are pretty incredible. Now, many of them have been superseded and have been replaced and have been updated and that sort of thing. And that's great. But the idea is let's get them all out there and see what they've got. And so, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's what that one we're working on. Okay. That's what we got, Carl.
Hey, William just emailed me or texted me and needs the link to the meeting. I'm not sure why he doesn't have it. So you can get that to him.
Yeah.
This leads us into a presentation by Anjali Bean, Water Resources Manager for the County of Santa Fe. And I want to preface this a little bit because having been involved with county government for more years than I'd like to remember sometimes, there comes a time when you run into people who absolutely understand us, those people out in the little rural communities, and appreciates what we're trying to do and appreciates the kind of situations that we're in. And I got to tell you, I've known Anjali for probably a little bit over a year now. And without question, she has such a sense and understanding, as does her boss, John Dupuy, in terms of what we're trying to achieve with this water planning, long range water planning, I guess. But anyway, she's been instrumental in terms of getting us to where we're at. She continues to be a really great resource, and I just want to thank her in advance of her presentation for all that she's done for us. So with that, Ms. Bean, please let us know what we're update on the pipeline project process.
Sure. Well, thank you for that kind introduction. I'm really looking forward to working on all of these. We have, even hearing, the presentations from this meeting, it's really amazing to me how many different ways we seem to be working in the same area right now. And I think it's a really, hopefully, exciting time that results in something valuable and some valuable changes that can come out of it. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is, like Carl said, the return flow pipeline Lower Santa Fe planning process that we've initiated. I think some of you have participated in the public meetings that we've had so far, which is great. So I'll just give you a little background on what we've done so far, and I guess some maybe to give those who are on this call who maybe are slightly less aware of where we're at. I'll go back a little bit farther, but so as most of you know, the city and the county signed an agreement in October, formally formalizing our partnership on this return flow pipeline project. It's still largely a city project. The county has committed to a 7% financial stake in the project, but our big ask as part of negotiating that much larger agreement was a commitment to participate, the county to lead and the city to substantively participate in a Lower Santa Fe planning process. And we worked with the coalition back and forth a lot on the specific wording of that agreement. And I think we've hopefully found a place ultimately that we can all be at least mutually dissatisfied with, if not anyone totally satisfied. But what I think was really important in that agreement is we were very clear that this planning process both addresses potential direct impacts that might result from the pipeline, but also what we termed as legacy impacts. John and I, have spent a lot of time talking to Carl over the last year and a half or so, maybe even, and hearing from lots of other, Darren and various other coalition members, about the decades of work and communication or lack thereof that have existed between this community and the county and city, and the issues that existed today will exist after the pipeline goes in place, potentially will be exacerbated by that, but potentially not, and we really want this planning process to encompass any and all issues that we see as things that we should be speaking with together. So in terms of, the basic update of where we're at is, we had a really substantive meeting specifically with the coalition as a meeting closed for them, and then an open public meeting to get feedback specifically on what our RFP for planning assistance might look like. We want to really make sure that we're doing this correctly. We have a couple of years to finish this plan, so we have the time to do it correctly, I think. And those meetings were, I think, well attended and super, super helpful on our end of trying to scope out the type of expertise that we need, and getting feedback on what that RFP
Actually, can
would
I
look like.
just add something real quick? The Pipeline Coalition consists of 21 organizations, associations, individuals. It's a pretty powerful group of folks that came together to address the water issues that will result from the pipeline. So that's it.
Yeah,
Continue.
and we're really grateful that you all have organized. I think it's much easier for us to have that organization in advance. It's very helpful for streamlining our communications as well. So, so we have those 2 public meetings. I just got a complete summary from our second meeting from our facilitator. So I can, Carl, I can send you, and I haven't done it yet. It's on my list of creating a portal on our county website in order to share summaries of those meetings, recordings of those meetings, just updates in general as this planning process goes forward. So Carl, I can send you those today, and I'll also be posting them on our website. In terms of, a timeline going forward, one of the things that was important to us regardless, but we also heard very strongly from the community was, the importance of engaging with both upper and lower watershed Pueblo representation. As everyone I'm sure knows, that is not always the easiest, or time. It can take a substantial amount of time to truly engage with the Pueblos in an effective manner, and we really want to do that right. So we have reached out, and we'll continue to reach out both from our staff level, but also perhaps at a higher, more government to government level as well. So that might end up pushing our timeline just a little bit. When we talked was it just last week or is it 2 weeks ago now? I'm losing time. We'd hope to get our RFP advertised before Christmas. I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen, but we are diligently moving forward. The goal, though, is to sort of by, early to mid spring, hopefully by March or so, to have a contract in place that will both help us with facilitation services, but also more technical expertise as we go through this planning process, which we anticipate not only just identifying challenges, but also discussing, talking through, vetting the technical feasibility of solutions. And so going through that process, we need some more technical support to make sure the strategies that are identified as a watershed plan are actually implementable and would actually solve the problems that were identified. So there might be a little bit of a lull, I think, in the next few months while we work through, consulting with our tribal partners and getting that RFP advertised. But that is the plan, by March or so. We would have our assistance in place and be able to. We also heard, I guess, from those public meetings, the importance of developing a very robust and defined stakeholder process in advance of getting to more of the technical aspects of the planning process. So we heard that, and we'll be including that in our RFP development. So that, I think, would be the first step once we have that assistance in place. So that's where we're at. I'm happy to take questions or discuss anything more.
Let me add a couple things. One, we've had 2 facilitated meetings. One was specific to the Pipeline Coalition. And the reason we did that is because the amount of time and energy and knowledge that we had gathered over the last 6 months, we felt it was important to really kind of let us to take a first shot at it. And then we had a public meeting, both again facilitated. And I got to tell you, in terms of providing information, important information, I think we did a pretty darn good job in terms of getting everything out and on the table in a sense. And there's two objectives. One is to start identifying kind of things that we want to get accomplished or things we want to plan for in terms of the river. And that's a wide gamut of things, obviously. And the other is to start looking at what kind of qualities or talents or experiences we want to see in a facilitator who's going to oversee the entire project. with a clear understanding that facilitator is not going to have all knowledge and must have the ability to reach out to professionals and to other resources in terms of gathering information. But this is really a comprehensive effort to really make something different. And we look at this in some regard as a way to develop a different relationship between large government entities like the city and county and rural communities, and how we can come together as rural communities and really add to the process. And as I think Leonard said earlier, he was impressed with our passion. We are passionate. There's no question about that. I mean, to a person, we want to do what's best for this river. It has been neglected, beat up, and tortured literally for the last many, many years, and it's time to address a lot of those problems. And what I really like about what Anjali alluded to was the legacy issues, because there are a host of legacy issues that we're dealing with a poorly, let's see how to put it, a poorly managed treatment plant. And it's old. It was built in 1966, and it has been patched and put together so many different times. It just needs to be something different. So that's another issue. But anyway, I do think that we're at a point now where we're really able to kind of step forward and do some things that are important in terms of the health and history. And I think it's so important to remember the history of this river. I mean, it was the El Camino Real. It was how people first came into New Mexico. It was how, in Guanonate in 1598, followed the Santa Fe River until he couldn't go any further and then came into La Cienega. And so that's part of our history and something that we shouldn't forget. It should be a part of the discussion. So any other questions? Go ahead.
Can I just add on that? Because I meant to send I sent sort of a cryptic chat. I don't have that resolution in my hand from the All Pueblo Council of Governors. I have a report from Keegan King, New Mexico Wilds intertribal agent. And so that is that they have solidified positions on particularly forest plan riparian management, as Andy said, is common to all three forests. At least that section of it is. There are commonalities between all three forests plans. They're not just contemporaneous. As far as policy, that's forest wide for all three. That was signed by all three of the directors. But that mainly it said we have positions on all this watershed management. We're aware of the pipeline issue. It's come up, and but give us a break until new tribal governments get set in after January. So I think it's not just. I think Anjali is very astute to say, yep, that's not just a possible delay. That's where you're at as far as communications and Pueblo solidarity with the sovereign nations. But and I'm assuming that communication is being made by county intergovernment liaison, or who's even filling that role these days?
I believe it's still Hutchie.
It's still Hutchie Miller. Okay, so
Yep.
there you have it. Very good. And I think I would just want to reiterate, particularly that it is appropriate and respectful to the sovereign nations with whom we have this common interest to approach them on the government level. That is the respectful level. Don't get your feelings hurt when you personally didn't get a response, or your group didn't get an outreach, and a response to the outreach. It's a matter of approaching them with the due respect.
Yeah, one thing that I want to point out
Agreed.
too, this is really for our folks from Utah, is that there are 23 pueblos in New Mexico, and out of that, I think there are only 6 that actually have elections. All the other ones are clan systems, and they make their decisions based on meeting in the Kiva and deciding on who's going to run the government for the next year. Some of them had extended it to 2 or 3 year periods, but most of them are still at a year, which makes it difficult to kind of figure out exactly who you're supposed to be talking to. So one of my suggestions is, and I think I made it in the chat, was to look at and I apologize, it's the Al Pueblo Governor's Council. Al Pueblo Council of Governors is what it is to get it up to that level so that we cover all of the pueblos, because it's not just Cochiti, it's not just Santo Domingo. There are all those pueblos that depend on water coming down the Rio Grande who are very concerned about what kind of water is going to be in that return flow pipe and what it's going to mean to their water down below. And that includes Sandia, Santa Ana, San Felipe. All of those communities are going to be concerned. And so I think at this point, I'm going to recommend it to the Pipeline Coalition is that we reach out to the Governor Council and see if that's a way to make sure they get or understand what we're up to. Because I think they'll appreciate what we're doing. It's just a matter of getting that information to them.
I need to stress again, there should be involvement either with I don't think the Pipeline Coalition has that person designated yet. So we may have to sort of sub that resource out to one of our coalition member groups that do have established. Otherwise, it's very important to have a federal liaison, a federal envoy is what I'm getting at. I cannot stress enough the importance of respecting the sovereignty of these nations. And municipal governments, county governments even will get the brush. We need to have at least some advocate from staff from our congressional delegation. Usually every senator and representative has a designated tribal communications person and work through that channel. I just don't want to see us insult anyone unnecessarily for our own gratification.
Let's plan to do that then, Darren. Okay. So any other questions for Anjali?
I have one if I could. Following up on what Darren just saying, we had been sort of informally told that the Bureau of Reclamation is in direct communication with some of the tribal entities, but that's about all that they're saying. Any update on that or any follow-up?
So I do know on the NEPA side, on the scoping of the EIA or EIS, the Bureau is the lead agency, so they are definitely at a high level, at the area manager level and higher, are in direct have initiated formal consultation with tribal entities. We have not been involved because it is a federal, government to government consultation. I don't know that I have too much to update you on, but I do know that it is happening. Darren is absolutely right that it's a hard time for tribal consultation right now, just because the holidays in general are very busy for them, as well as transitions in government. But I think as we go forward, they will continue with those obligations as well. But I do also, we all know this, but I just want to say it at every opportunity, we are trying hard to separate those two processes. We're really hoping that we can go far beyond the technical NEPA legal obligations of the direct impacts of the pipeline. So this is, separate from that NEPA consultation.
Hey, Anjali, did we have a deadline for a decision by the Bureau of Reclamation about whether it's going to be an environmental impact statement or whether it's going to be an environmental assessment?
It's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it. I think that's probably, I'm not sure. Sorry.
Well,
I can check on that.
Everybody from our group is pushing for the environmental impact statement, given the nature of the project and existing environmental issues these are the legacy issues. And so let's keep our fingers crossed for that one. Any other questions for Anjali? Okay, the next thing on the agenda is identification of groups for stakeholder involved planning process. And I'm gonna ask Leonard here, since he seems to have been taking this on pretty seriously. How do you go about identifying stakeholders? And certainly Dr. Flint, you can add to it as well, but I'm gonna put him on the spot a little bit, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, and that's a phenomenal question and one that I've been grappling with throughout all of this. I think when we talk about water, particularly in a very arid West, everybody feels like a stakeholder. Everybody's affected by decisions regarding water. We have relied a lot on our collaboration with our local partners, the Santa Fe Watershed Association, and then we do a lot of snowballing. Since we are kind of outside, we're very much outsiders in this and don't have an on the ground feel for the community other than through this kind of looking glass at times. As we did our interviews, we asked one of our questions, which was both one for analysis and one as well to expand our list, was this: who needs to be at this proverbial table? And from there, that helped grow our list a lot. But oftentimes it is like, if we go with kind of classic definitions, it's landowners, or it's folks with decision-making power, or organizations with missions related to the watershed. But from my perspective, part of the difficulty of defining and operationalizing that is you're always leaving somebody out that's really important. So I know that's not a great answer to your question, but at least as we've gone about doing this, it's really been relying on networks of associations, and that talking to people and seeing who else they think needs to be involved.
Yeah, and I'll just add that it's a combination of a bottom-up approach, right? Really tapping into the wisdom and the people who just know the players at that local to regional scale, and then coupled that with some sort of top-down approach of the categories of interest groups that we know from a lot of research on natural resources and environmental and community issues. You know, sometimes some get marginalized, some have real loud voices. We try to even the playing field so that we are hearing from a really diverse set of voices. It's not our job in any way. In fact, it's our job not to provide preferential treatment to any particular voice. It's our job to try to get that cross-cutting, that cross-cut perspective. You know, I think our list of stakeholders that we eventually sort of, at some point, you have to stop making lists and just get on with the work. But I think we were well over 100, maybe even upwards of 150 people and entities. You know, and then you reach out and you do your very best to make connections in a particular time frame, and you work with who's willing to work with you. But we never want to suggest that any group of stakeholders that we finally interact with are the exhaustive group. And that's really important, you know, for our research in support of the Watershed Association's planning process. But I think any effort is to be very clear, very transparent about this process. And yes, we do have development and construction interests incorporated, Darren, yes.
When you do a survey, is it customized to the stakeholder group?
Totally depends on the purpose of the survey. But, you know, first thing you have to do is identify what's the goal. What are you trying to accomplish and achieve with your survey effort? And then we'll always, you know, advise trying to reduce bias in your questioning so that it's as transparent and as fair of an instrument, if you will, for gathering data, gathering information. You know, when you're surveying people, you're surveying subjective perspectives and opinions and feelings, and it's really using best scientific practices to get at those very heartfelt emotions and perspectives. So that sometimes seems to clash for some people, that you're using science to get at things that are really not terribly scientific. But that's the really importance of this human dimensions of natural resources, because we think that values and attitudes really matter, as well as the power dynamics amongst all of these different people with regards to scarce resources.
That's pretty cool.
I just laughed, especially glad to see my cousin William there. How funny it is as we consider the groups of stakeholders. It's only a couple generations that we're even having this discussion, because I was brought up that we were the stakeholders, and this are all outside interests that have no right, okay, because it was based in that very much in the water rights argument. And I'm sure in your interviews with my vecinos up and down the river, that's where it starts out, is el que mantiene el derecho tiene, right? So and that's where it's important to see, though, and be in terms of keeping integrity in your objectivity, to look at those interests. There has been a voice from construction and development and growth, and hopefully county planning has had some input into what sustainable growth vision looks like, as opposed to sprawl and uncontrolled growth. And so, but we've certainly seen, and that's, I think, the root of this conversation at all times, is the competition for the scarce resources. And it's interesting to see what type of collaboration it takes. But and in accounting for those stakeholders, where we put our priorities, and that's where the conversations turn to values, to core values, and whether the predominant core values are in line or in harmony with the environment or the sustainability of the watershed, or whether they're not. So interesting that's I would just thank you, because I've seen peripherally the work you guys are doing, and so thanks for at least creating another capsule of that, right? It's hard to get, with all these shifts and different influences on cultures that are threatened from a lot of different angles.
Yeah, and the historical perspective is really important, because you can get a snapshot of perspectives at a given period of time, but really trying to be mindful of how things have evolved, and that proverbial table, who's at the table, and everybody thinks there's a different set of people who should be at the table. So that's
sure.
That whole perceptions of collaboration and how it should roll out evolves over time. We're quite mindful of that as well. But
that's where your work is interesting, because it takes that human element and takes it beyond simple tracking of demographics. No.
Yeah, thank you. I have to run to another meeting, but I'm so grateful to you for letting us spend a little time in your effort here today. And I have enjoyed learning from all of you so much. And I look forward to the next chance we get to interact. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Take care.
So Leonard, I'm going to again ask you a question. If we were to come up with a survey, would you get any extra credit by looking at our survey and giving us your opinion as to whether or not it's a good or bad one?
I'm not going to say I couldn't convince the university, but I certainly, I have an apprehension to the way a lot of academic work can go with research, where it's like, I come in, I meet all of you in the community, even though this has been very much virtual. I publish my papers and I move on. I don't love that dynamic a lot. It feels very disingenuous and disjointed. If you put together a survey and you would like somebody to review it, I would be happy to review that.
We're going to call it upon you to do that. And we will get you more connected with the community. We won't let you go.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
We are the land of enchantment, okay?
I've already sent him an invitation to come hang out.
Oh, you've got to take them up on that invitation. You can't. Yeah, you got to do it. Absolutely got to do it. So let's see, any other questions about stakeholders? So I'm going to go into something that I've started I'm a member of the Santa Fe County Water Advisory Committee. Is that right? Water Policy Advisory Committee. And one of the things we've been looking at, and this ties a lot of these things together, is how we do drought management, or how we communicate with, and believe it or not, 12,000 well owners in Santa Fe County. How we communicate the need for them to save water, to conserve water. And that becomes a really complex issue because it's difficult to reach these people and to communicate with them. And there's something like 85 water associations, I believe, something like that. It's an amazing, and how many of these have popped up in the last 30 or 40 years is just mind-boggling. And it's certainly one of those things we need to pay attention to. And so one of my ideas, and I'm running by this some of the locals about the Environment Department does water fairs. I'm not sure if they're doing them now or whether that's still something they're able to do, but certainly something we need to research. And a water fair is where people can bring in samples of their well water and get it tested for free. We did one, actually Ed Siri coordinated one we did in La Cienega, and we had over 100 people show up. It was pretty impressive. And so I'm thinking that would be an opportunity. You could do it geographically to certain areas, but at the same time, as well as doing the water fair, is to start providing those people with geohydrological information about the area that they live in. And that's one way of getting them to understand that these aquifers that are really kind of unique in the Santa Fe area, Santa Fe County area, people need to understand where the water comes from and how limited those resources are. And I wish that the city planning department had a little better understanding of that as well, but that's an aside. And so I just want to run that by and see what people think about that idea as a way to get the word out. And the other thing I want to make sure we do in getting this drought information out, this is specific to La Cienega, but other areas as well, is making sure we do this in Spanish. It's not just English, because we have sizable Mexican immigrant population throughout our areas, and we need to make sure they understand what the water issues are. I mean, we have people come to La Cienega and all of a sudden put in a farm just using well water. And you sit there and think, obviously they're not understanding the limitations of their water and what they're allowed to use. We have people that put in stables. I mean, it's one of those things where it's a cultural thing to some extent, but at the same time, it's our responsibility as a community to educate them and get them to understand and to participate in the process of conserving water. So I just want to run that by the local folks and people like William and Darren and Andy, Bobby. Let me know what you think about that.
So one major question is it possible, is there such a thing as an image of our aquifer?
Yes.
There is.
Yeah,
so
Bureau of Geology has a pretty good one. I think you could break that down into specific areas as well. So that's obviously that would be something I don't think they've done it for every area. There are some missing pieces. And so that would be seen as there's some way we can get them to complete the puzzle and make sure all those areas in Santa Fe County are the geohydrological information is specific to that area is available.
Okay, and Carl, just a little addition to the what you said that about well use. I mean, I personally know young people who have bought properties that have a well on them, and they say, and when we have a well and we can do whatever we want, we can use as much water as we want, and they don't really, there is a sense that because the water is underground, that there's a ton of it and it's just going to be there forever and ever. So I think that there is, somehow combining what you talked about bringing the water to be, water to be tested, and include in that somebody doing a really great presentation about here's what the aquifer looks like, here's how the aquifer maintains themselves because of rain, and and there's water in the river, or there's or somebody is releasing water, and how does the aquifer regenerate? How does the aquifer get used up? And that's by wells. And so among other things, but mostly wells, right? So there's something in there, like having a really great visual sciencey presentation. Andy, you've got something with that.
No, I just, it's something that we've been asking for is it's groundwater mapping. So many of the studies, even like Peggy Johnson, they did a 2-dimensional. Here's the extent of the aquifer. El Dorado aquifer is the main one coming down, but there hasn't been a 3-dimensional. How much volume of water is held in that aquifer? And that's a very expensive and complex bit of mapping, as you might imagine, and so that's Stacy Timmons, Bureau of Geology. They've been working on that by but not monitoring wells, but taking the old airport well, for instance, and things like that. But they haven't, even they haven't done a 3-dimensional volumetric type of analysis. It's very expensive and it just hasn't been done yet. One other quick thing, Stanford University did a lot of that for the Colorado River Basin. And they said they were going to do it for the Rio Grande River Basin, but I haven't seen them. Of course, today we've got a helicopter flying around, so maybe that's them.
Okay.
So what does 3D entail, Andy? How do you do that?
Well, I was going to say Darren has his hand up, but basically it's not just putting in say a well or a remote sensing and saying here's the limit of the aquifer. It's how deep is it? It starts at I'm going to make up numbers here, 35 feet down, and it goes down to 120 feet. So you put those together in a plot, and all of a sudden you can start developing volumetric, and you can see if they're being depleted or not just on the top level of the water, but also on the bottom. And this has a lot to do also with water quality. Some of the benzene and some of these things, they tend to be on the top. So where's your well? You don't want it to be on your top, you want it to be on the bottom.
Right.
Darren, do you have a question?
I guess I might have been hearing Bobby saying too, that in terms of a presentation, that it may be not as specific or scientific, but maybe more interpretive in terms of how much fundamental understanding are we able to contribute to the public generally about the function of an aquifer and how the watershed feeds it and it has a chance for recharge, or it has a chance to be overexploited or whatever. And it's leading me to wonder if we have does the Watershed Association have an existing contact or can do the outreach to say, I'm thinking of, we talk a lot about in terms of preservation of our culture and our lifeway and that. And is this understanding happening like in high school geology classes? Is it happening in high school science where there's somebody building a model, a miniature aquifer, right? And can we find the students that are doing that to make those presentations and share it among their peers or what? I'm kind of interested there. That's what I think is one of these collaborative roles that we touch on a lot in terms of that. And I sort of yeah, between what I think that's important. Because I see that as a generational threshold. We're picking up that understanding. Then you get with the facts of exactly locally what's going on and exactly what side of the fault, and then what such a, gee, I never thought about 3D mapping it, right, to determine volume that way, or giving the basic principles like, yeah, all the pollutants are going to float like oil rises to the top of any volume of water, right? So I don't know. It caught my attention. I thought that might be a facet of what Bobby was talking about.
Anjali?
Just to add to that, Darren, I think the county is starting to try to expand our collaboration with the city of Santa Fe's water conservation team, Christine Chavez and her team. And they, they are piloting what are they calling it? It's a backpack program with, yeah. There you go. That it's aimed at a younger age. It's not high school students, but what they is not super included. They had largely built that out before we started working with them more closely, but something we're talking about in a future version of that packet and the materials that they provide is talking more about wells.
Totally aimed at high school people so we can radicalize them, no?
But even starting from starting at a younger age, talking about this is what an aquifer is, this is how groundwater works, this is how recharge comes down from the mountains, really broad strokes, not necessarily talking about, well, there's a perched aquifer here and there's the Tsuke and the Otto formation and all the technical parts, but that program doesn't really talk a lot about domestic wells because it was aimed largely from the outset at City of Santa Fe public schools. But definitely something we're thinking about in future versions of it, starting to talk about what wells, what is your well, where does your water come from if it doesn't come from BDD. So something we're thinking about as well.
Lori?
Yeah, I'll just offer that Anjali will be happy to be part of that conversation. That we kind of last minute collaborated with Christine at the city to create this booklet. And yeah, it's not super specific, but there are a couple of pages of like, this is backwards, sorry, but where does our water come from? There's ground, at least introduces some of the concepts, but it's kind of it's a list of kind of at-home activities that a wide range of youth can do and things like that. But I will just give a shout out to our education programs that we're doing within the Santa Fe Watershed Association, that we've been doing this 5th grade program, My Water, My Watershed, for about a decade now, that mostly focuses on surface water and what is a watershed, but we do discuss groundwater and kind of the relationships between surface water and groundwater. But we did just get some funding from the city to expand that program to 6th grade and then create more older curricula for arroyos. And of course, arroyos are talking about arroyos in 6th grade is a great introduction to talking about groundwater and erosion and water tables and all that kind of stuff. But definitely also incorporating kind of more human history and kind of cultural impacts and cultural history and relationships to the landscape. So if anyone, if and as we as we start working more intensely on this curriculum, if and as any of you all are interested in being part of that, we're definitely very happy to keep you in the loop or get your feedback on that. But we definitely see that need, and the 5th grade program we do in almost all Santa Fe public schools. And so the 6th grade, hopefully we'll work up to that. And but we are kind of looking to be expanding our education programming and collaborating with the city and the county to do that. So definitely exploring more groundwater and incorporating that awareness of more of the lower watershed as well. The 5th grade kind of focuses on the upper watershed. So yeah, I think it's a really important time to bring that up. And yeah, Darren, if you have more specific ideas, or if you would like me to keep you in the loop as we develop that curriculum, I'd be happy to do that. I will say that I'm very encouraged that as the Santa Fe Public Schools and the state education department are developing these new science standards called Next Generation Science Standards, that have New Mexico specific standards. And one of the nice things about those standards and the new social studies standards is that they do kind of emphasize the importance of place-based education at least a little bit more. And so some of that, instead of students learning about coastal hydrology, they can learn about local hydrology, and teachers can modify their lessons to be more rooted. So I think we will start seeing more support on a systemic level for more of that place-based education. So hopefully that gives a little ray of hope that will help to support and cultivate as we move forward.
Maureen, I have a folder that is from the city of Albuquerque that I have had for quite a while. I shared it with the Watershed Association some years ago, and it is their education program for water. I would love to give it to you if you want it. And, and then also, I have taught after school programs about water with kids, but it's more art-based and how, anyway, so yes, I would like to be in touch with you. So.
Great. Well, I have your email, so we have each other's email, so I'll definitely connect with you.
Okay, good.
That sounds really cool. And one of the things I think the Water Policy Advisory Committee would be very interested in helping out in any way we can in terms of getting information out there. I had a question for Anjali, because we know that there is a well monitoring program that the county has been involved with for a while now. So any updates on that? I know we're hoping to get Jacqueline Bean maybe at our next meeting to discuss it in detail, but I just wondering if you knew anything about it, and if you could get a little summary about what its intent is.
Sure, and Jacqueline is definitely the expert on this. She's the one that's spearheading this program, but the short answer, I guess, is that part of the SLDC and getting new subdivision approval, if you're suing, say, a family lot split or any sort of larger subdivision in the county now, is it comes with a voluntary plat restriction, which says that you're only allowed to use 0.25 acre feet for your home domestic use if you have a well, if you're not connected to an existing water system. But enforcing that plat restriction has turned out to be quite difficult, both in terms of what our formal legal enforcement abilities are, but then also just the technical side of that, how you understand who might be violating that plat restriction, how that gets reported, and then how it gets enforced once it's been reported. It's been sort of a lingering goal of the county to try to work on how to get this right. That unfortunately has just been lingering, and it is now within the sustainability division's purview, and they are moving forward with it. They had submitted published an advertised an RFP. Unfortunately, we did not get any responses to that RFP, which was a real disappointment. So I know that Jacqueline is now sort of working through what to do next if the RFP needs to be revised. If he's reaching out to those who had indicated they were perhaps interested in applying, or to understand why they didn't. She's, I think, also exploring other procurement pathways so that we can get some assistance on that. But at the moment, we are not moving forward with evaluating because we did not get any proposals to evaluate. So unfortunately, not a great update in terms of next steps, but it is definitely still high on Jacqueline's list of things to do, and she has support up through the county manager and BCC to get something done soon. So. I will say the goal, I should also, that this RFP that was out was specifically focused on La Cienega as a pilot region to try to take a small bite at this much larger challenge, and to work through trying to just understand the challenge, put together a plan of how to actually both monitor and enforce these restrictions. So. But we'll see how we go forward.
That would be in addition to the Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources study that they're doing for the La Cienega area as well.
Yes, because this is specifically focused on metering of domestic wells. So they are, in theory, folks who have that plat restriction are required to report their annual water usage and have a meter and report to the county their annual water usage. But again, enforcing that turns out to be quite difficult. So we have not had a lot of responsiveness to that requirement.
Getting people to put meters on their wells is going to be one of the challenges. And actually, this is the La Cienega Valley Association brought this up a number of years ago because we were obviously concerned because we had the understanding that this was being done. And so we raised our hand, and actually it was one of our board members, Robert Romero, went to the county and found out it hadn't been done at all. And so now it's catching up, which makes it even more difficult because people have established how much water they're using and they're not going to cut back. And so it's going to be an exceptional challenge without question. Excuse me. So thank you very much, and keep us posted. And as soon as Jacqueline Bean feels comfortable that she can add something to the conversation, we would welcome her to one of our meetings. Last thing on our agenda for today is the flood control management. I'm going to let William talk a little bit about.
I want to say on that point that the amount suit would probably lend at least a rubric for a lot of that work. I don't know if I imagine a number of people here are familiar with the Amat suit, but I imagine there's at least some means of following what they've done there. Not that they have the funds to push all of that. My property and where I live in currently is a part of that, but
I apologize for laughing, but Anjali is the county overseer of the Amat project. And so she's got a firsthand understanding.
Right.
Many
hours. It unfortunately perhaps gives us more lessons on what not to do versus what to do, but not to say that those aren't useful. But they're also, hitting substantial challenges on enforcing their metering requirement. So they are in the same boat that the state engineer does not have the staff capacity to enforce a rule that they wrote themselves. So it's hard.
Well, I think what's going on with the Office of the State Engineer right now is of concern to everybody. With John D'Antonio leaving and basically burning the bridge as he leaves, and from all our indications, it's got some challenges, and it sounds like they're pretty big organizational issues that they've got to work through, and some leadership issues as well. So any other questions or anything to add to the well monitoring, metering? Okay, so now we're going to talk about flood control. And this is something that William's a little passionate about. So I'm going to let him talk a little bit about it. But it's one of those things that really has to be included in this conversation. Kelsey, do you still have your hand up? I didn't mean to. Okay. But it's one of those things that you don't see for a couple of years and it doesn't happen. But when it happens, it's devastating. And as William said, I think it's 3 years ago, 2018 is when we had a flood in La Cienega. We had a wave of water come through that was probably 25 feet deep, upwards from 100 to 150 feet wide. I mean, we're one of the major drainages that comes out of Santa Fe, that and the Santa Fe River. And so when those events happen, they're really bad, and everybody reacts and tries to think about it then, and then it just goes away. And so I think it's one of those things we've got to plan for the future. And what can we do to minimize those impacts of flood events like that? And there's absolutely things that can be done. I mean, one of the things you want to do is slow down the water, figure out a way to slow the water down because it does less damage. And then it allow it to spread out. And guess what? It helps the aquifer. So there are things that can be done, but let William go ahead and discuss his perspective.
Thank you, Carl. So on July 22nd, 2018, we had the 1,000 year flood event, and it was pretty devastating. And the thing is that with climate change, we'll be having these more and more. And so if in 3 years, we haven't really had a city or county response to this. And this is what was starting to concern me. And what really triggered me, is there is a legal notice 89014, and it's an invitation to bid. And it's for Santa Fe River repairs and bank stabilization from Ricardo Bridge to the Don Jose outfall from the city of Santa Fe. And this is really their first official response to this flooding, because it wiped out a lot of bank emplacements that were protecting the Santa Fe River Trail. And the whole Santa Fe River really took a hit on this 1,000-year flood. And you could see it all the way from the reservoirs all the way down. And there was a city housing project just off of Baca Street and Camino Porvenir. I don't know, about 15 houses. And what had happened is they had block walls around them, and they're kind of near the acequia. So the acequia was carrying all of this water, probably a similar wave that was coming down, like Carl kind of describes. And so each house's block wall would fill up to the top, and then the wall would collapse over, and then the next wall would fill up to the top and then collapse. But and that happened to all 15 houses. But the worst thing was, is as the water filled up to the block wall, the other place it could go in was into the houses, so they all got flooded. And the thing is when you're building a block wall like that, you flip over one brick so that there is space for it to drain out. And so I mean, there are precautions that can be taken. And I think Santa Fe Watershed Association, they're adopting a Arroyo project. That's probably the thing that we need to go with full force and get all of those tributaries that are coming into the Santa Fe River. If, like Carl said, using Bill Zedike's 3S strategy, slow it down, spread it out, make it sink in. We need that water in the aquifer. We don't need it coming down in a 25-foot wall of water flooding La Cienega. We need to have each and every arroyo kind of, just not be a raging current that has all kinds of garbage that people have thrown in and coming down. And that was the other big thing is, all of that trash that's in the river was, at the forefront of that big wave. And, you know, so if a person was standing there, they would have been instantly killed because, you know, there's maybe a shopping cart or a car bumper or a tire or, you know, whatever it is. I mean, that type of thing, if someone was just standing right there in the river, it's devastating. And it really hurt the Calle Deborah Bridge. You know, any of our structures along the river are in jeopardy also. So we need our city and county officials to pay attention. Right after this, there was a listing done for FEMA and like an inventory of damage, and both the city and county participated in that. And I think it's, you know, like this group should be given a copy of that, and we should then go back to our county commission and our city councilors and mayor and say, hey, you know, we need to do something because we know this is coming at us more frequently and harder because of climate change. I mean, you know, we're in a very dry period now, but what will happen is in the summer monsoon, we are going to get slammed. It's like payback for being dry right now. You know, we're going to be flooded sometime in the future. And to ignore it as a public official is really negligence and probably criminal negligence, because we know 2 mules died. We know what 7 or 10 cars were taken. We know how many houses were flooded. And it's not just that FEMA will pay the bill. I mean, this has to be preventative type of stuff. And then Lord knows what happened to La Bajada. I mean, maybe we should ask Darren about that. But, you know, I mean, it just keeps building in intensity as it goes down the Santa Fe River. And that's 46 miles long. So, I mean, the mistakes of the city of Santa Fe are felt by Agua Fria, then they're felt by Cieneguilla, and then La Cienega, and then La Bajada, and then Peña Blanca. So, I mean, we've got, and it's water. We need water. Why are we letting it escape? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. So, I mean, that's my rant.
I'm going to add to that. So there are some things that I've been talking about for a long time to the city, which is permeable surfaces. So there are a whole lot of new parking lots that have been put in various places. And when the water comes down, it goes off of that parking lot. And so it's not a big deal to create permeable surfaces that have holes in them, you know, and I don't, you know, to maybe go in and drill holes in existing parking lots, do it, and check dams in the, you know, in various places. And I know Andy's been working on that, and there's more, but you know, the water that comes off of somebody's roof and in big box stores, you know, a lot of that stuff just goes down into a pipe and it goes into the sewer, or it goes, you know, or it's released into some place where then it overflows and then goes, continues into the river. So there's a lot that can be done, what else? Curb cuts. I've been trying to get the city to do a curb cut over at the post office, the Pacheco post office. And when Andrew Erdman was working with them, I kept bugging him about it. And he finally said, there's too much bureaucracy. Like, you know, I can't get it, you know, it's legal to do it for the city, but to get them to actually physically go over there and create a curb cut so that the water from that parking lot is going to water the trees was impossible. So, you know, I'm frustrated with the bureaucracy and the lack of care. And then
Bobby,
William,
yeah,
you said a lot about that.
So Bobby, like your example of parking lots not being permeable, the Enterprise Bank, the old Los Alamos National Bank on Cerrillos Road, that has a complete parking lot where they're using the bricks that are instead of asphalt. And then they also have a container system underneath if there is flooding. And so that's a perfect example. And I think maybe a lot of our contractors don't know how to do that technology, even though it's very, very simple.
Yeah.
If I could just throw in, so Maury, who you've met, is in charge of our rain garden program. So a couple of things to be aware of is that when you're taking water off a parking lot, just drilling holes doesn't necessarily work, because remember, underneath it's compacted soil that they've designed to make it not be infiltratable. And then and so, for instance, we've got some going on right now. Rain gardens going in at the corner of Old Santa Fe Trail and East Alameda. And then another one at Nye Elementary, I believe. And then Amara Nash is the program director for our Adopt an Arroyo program and the Adopt a River program. And so it's her job to figure out, one, how to get all the garbage out of the arroyos, and two, how to increase the infiltration back to our aquifers in the arroyos. The arroyos are unnatural, and as they've been functioning, and so these are two people that's what they do. That's their, and so volunteers and funding. That's all we need. That's all we ask. Thanks.
Carl, I forgot to mention that there was over 1,000 chickens, sheep, goats, and pigs that were killed in this thing, because most of these communities have their corrals down by the river. And so the whole corrals were swept away, all kinds of logs and everything. And so that comes down the river, and that is dangerous, because that's the kind of thing that can block the Caya-Debra Bridge.
That's a real issue in La Cienega. People will build stables. They'll have their, it's all in the river or in the arroyo because they can get away with it. So I'm wondering how we can expand the Adopt Arroyo program out to places like La Cienega. Is that something we need funding and volunteers. Volunteers we can come up with, if we can get some ideas about cost, maybe that's something we can check out as well.
I mean, yes, absolutely. I think that there are a huge number of arroyos that are opportunities, both in the city and the county. But yeah, as Andy said, it's volunteers and it's funding. We work with sponsor or steward teams to come up with plans and then try to get those plans funded. And really,
what would a plan typically cost? There's probably no typical cost, but an average cost.
I mean, I would say, Andy, you can jump in if I'm off, but like a low cost one, maybe 10 to 15 grand, and more likely 50 grand.
Yep. But I'll throw in, that's one of the services we do. If you put together a steward team for, let's say, the Arroyo Hondo down close to, the track, contact Amara and say, we want to be a steward team. We actually, there's a formal process, if you will, and an agreement. And then we have a consultant that will come in and meet with the steward team that we cover to develop that sort of preliminary plan. The implementation is the big one, but you can get a preliminary plan, through us for free. We love to have a business sponsor for those reaches also, but that's part of our job as well. Is trying to get the two together.
Andy,
actually, it's part of Amara's job.
Andy, I think I can. I'm going to work on this a little bit about the sponsor part, but and again, do you have a visual of all the arroyos? Yeah. Is it on your website?
Yeah, they're labeled. All the ones that are currently like signed and adopted are labeled in different colors, but you can see the whole network.
But how about the ones that are not? They're
Yeah,
also in there? Okay.
Yeah, you can see the whole network on it's a Google map that Maury created.
Oh, beautiful. Okay,
Interactive.
great.
Mhm.
We need
Yeah,
those.
it's kind of all of the primary arteries, you know, not all of the different drainages and everything, but the bigger arroyos, Chamisos, Hondo, etc. You know, the named arroyos are.
All right. Oh, and then one other image, the artist team, the Harrisons, were brought in. This was many years ago now, and they did a project along the Santa Fe River. This was through the Art Institute, and they created a really beautiful map, which, Andy, I don't know if you have that CD anymore of that, or the DVD that shows that's a map of the, it's the Rio Grande, but it's also, you know, it's all of these blue veins moving into the, you know, and it's beautiful. And I wonder if that could also be utilized as a visual too.
We do have that CD from the Harrison. We passed out a lot of those 8 years ago and 9 years ago. But we've got one or two in here. That's a good resource.
But can you pull it and put it on your website?
Well, I don't know, and that's what we'll kind of look into. You know, that was all done, you know, with their own copyrights and stuff.
No, there isn't. I mean, I personally know because I worked with them a little bit on this, and with the Art Institute, and their whole premise was to be used.
Okay.
So use it.
So I won the services of Bill Zedike, and it was a Cavera Coalition silent auction, and so I bid highest there, and he came out and did a survey out on Highway 14 on our ranch, and he was saying that our ranch, because they had so much cattle that would always come in from different pastures and stuff, and so they eroded a lot of stuff, and he said it was the most eroded piece of property probably in Santa Fe County that wasn't a true badlands. And so, you know, he was looking at like one rock check dams and everything, but we don't have any rocks on the property. So, but we have a lot of juniper trees. And he said, well, you know, juniper trees will last 100 years, you know, once you cut them and throw them in. And what we did in a lot of the arroyos was we took old hog wire that was all bent up and rusty, and then we staked it into the ground, and then we put our juniper and we tied it to the hog wire. And that was about 6 years ago. And now it's holding back about 6 inches of dirt behind it. So it's about an inch a year that is being moved, you know. So I mean, that's, you know, if we can stop erosion that way, that's another good thing. I mean, it's not pretty, but it's working.
That's what counts if something works. Okay, anything else about flood control? I just want to close. One of the things that we've discussed before and I haven't attended to is tours of the lower Santa Fe watershed. And that would include stops at actually Ed Series Place, maybe Jose Varela Lopez, the Rael Ranch in El Cañon, Tres Rios. By the way, Tres Rios is for sale. So if you've got $6 million, you can buy it. But it would be, and then I want to bring in, and I've already talked to the folks at El Ranchitos Colondrinas, but use that as the last stop so people can actually see a little bit of the history of the river. And so obviously I haven't gotten the tours together But Felicity and I have been talking about maybe doing a video tour. And so I'm just putting that out there as an idea. Maybe we can discuss it more at the next meeting. But it's something I think would be really interesting to interview people who are connected to the land. You know, and I think we could identify a number of them that would be able to give us some really good information about their connection, their family's connection to those areas. So that's just something I'll bring up and make sure that's on our next agenda. Anything else, folks?
You know what you could do with that too is Rich Schrader at River Source. You know, he has a drone that he flies, and he's got all kinds of actually discs of you know, he's flowing the whole river by drone. And so you know, we could use a drone picture to connect one of the properties. You know, as it's going down.
We tried to do that, you know, when the city was going to do that pulse. We actually tried to get Rich, and then also Esha Kyokyo has a drone, and it's too close to the airport. Couldn't get permission. And to give you an idea, it goes, even the Swan Park, that's too close. That's a restricted zone for.
Wow. How far down the river does it go? Do you know?
You know, I don't know is the honest answer, but.
It's got to be on the ground then. We probably will maybe add a little drone stuff, but it sounds like it's got to be on the ground.
So I'd suggest that you get up and as far as you can go down the river, yes, but if you can get up on the Caja del Rio and go up all the way to the end of the La Bajada Mesa, at that point too is a good place to get your own personal aerial by your height of eye and see the Santa Fe River as it comes down through the Bocas de Cenetu and through La Bajada, and then you can see all the way 6 miles away, Cochiti Pueblo, no?
Yeah.
So Hilario Romero's son, Pascual, has a drone also. And in the El Rancho de los Golondrinas presentation he did, I noticed he had a lot of drone shots in that. So, you know, and it seemed to be from what Darren's perspective is, you know, from the Caja.
Yeah.
Well, do you know anybody that will do videos that we could employ to do the interviews? Okay,
let me pass you on the contact information for Global Eyes, who's the outfit that's been working on New Mexico Wilds video library for the Caja del Rio preservation effort. No? So let's reach out to them maybe. I don't know what kind of budgetary concerns or what other movida they're on or what. So
yeah, we've got tons of money in our treasury. We don't have to worry about it.
It's virtual currency, no? It's yeah.
There we go. Bitcoin. Anyway,
we'll have the La Bajada peso. Well, remember I invited.
It's got a lot of zeros on the end of it. No.
Yeah, point zeros. So we invited Hannah Crawford to. She did our oral history interviews to the collaborative meeting. Gosh, you know, 3-4 years ago, and she's working at LifeLink. So I'll email her and see if she would be interested in doing that. So yes, she had the greatest video equipment possible. So
nice.
And her master's degree in oral history from Columbia University.
Whoa, that's impressive.
Yeah.
So anything else today, folks? Thanks as always, appreciate it. Thanks for the Watershed for hosting this. Good to see you, Maureen and Mara. Anjali, as always, thank you very much. See you, boys.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, sir. Thanks, you guys.
Have a good one.
Nah.
Yeah.